Hello, my name is Matthew Bellisario. Welcome to the BellisarioSonic YouTube channel, and I'm really excited to have with us here today a Canadian composer, trumpeter, pianist, and multiple award winner musician here, Brad Turner. So I recently reviewed his wonderful CD sitting here, and I can't wait to talk to him about his artistic journey here. Welcome.
Thanks, Matthew. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you on, and I definitely want to hear how we get all the way up to this album. It looks like you've got about 13 records as a leader, but you've also have you've done fusion music, and I find it interesting you play both trumpet and piano,
Yeah.
which is kind of unique. So tell us a little bit about your how you got into jazz music. You're from Canada, correct?
Yeah. I'm from Canada, from Vancouver, well, Greater Vancouver area, small town called Langley. It's not as small as it used to be, but growing up, I'm from a musical family, and my granddad is like a band director, like concert band, you might say, and he led a community band in a community up here in New Westminster. He started it in 1939, I think, and so he was also, my granddad was in our province, British Columbia, was the first accredited teacher to teach music in school, teach band in school. Up until that point in the early days, they would get a military bandmaster or someone to come in and be an itinerant kind of person coming around. But Grandpa Fred was, he started the first band program in our province. And my dad, who's retired, he's also a musician, band director, an educator, music administrator in the high school district up here, one of the districts for many years. So I kind of grew up in an environment that was musically really, really rich. All of my siblings and my cousins, we all played in my grandpa's concert band. We played in my dad's concert band. So music was just everywhere. And when I was a little boy, I started on piano, actually, when I was 7. And at age 10, grade 5, 5th grade, we were lucky. We had a real great musical she was a really excellent music teacher, and we just had a little crew there was a small group of us, but we were really enthusiastic, and she started a small jazz band, if you could believe it, when I was 10 years old. And we didn't know anything about anything, but we were having a great time, and that kind of got the ball rolling for me. I started playing trumpet at that time because they didn't have a piano in the concert band at school. So I was playing trumpet, and that was my grandpa's instrument, so that kind of made sense to me, and I started that when I was 10. A lot of people ask about that, and I know it's up here in our neck of the woods. There's real precedent for that. When I was growing up, one of my big heroes was a Canadian musician named Hugh Fraser, and he played trombone and piano. Also, there's a great world-class musician named Phil Dwyer, who's just a little older than me. He's Canadian, and he lived in New York for a long time. He plays piano and tenor saxophone. And the list kind of goes on. It just seemed to be a thing. And I think it started with people like Hugh and Phil doing it, and we just sort of followed along. So I guess the thing is I never stopped playing either of the instruments, and I played them all through high school and into college. I went to university in the United States, and I did classical trumpet degree and a jazz degree as an undergrad person. And then I went down to the University of North Texas, which was a really great experience for me. And I met so many wonderful musicians from all over the world that many of them I managed to maintain relationships with, professional, and I've worked with them and played with them since then. I graduated, this is a long time ago now. It seems like yesterday, but like 1992. Holy crap. And at that time, I was really into the music, and I'd made lots of connections with people, and I hadn't made any recordings or anything yet, but one of my best friends, Seamus Blake, who is also from up here, from those days, Ingrid Jensen, also like from our crew of musicians of that era, another musician you might know, Diana Krall. So that we're all sort of in that same sort of graduating class. We were in honor band together, So watching Seamus and Ingrid sort of go off to New York, and Ingrid went to Europe, I came back to Vancouver, and there were a number of reasons for that. I really, I wanted to move to New York. That that was the thing. But my family's here, and there were some also extenuating circumstances that had to do with some other stuff that I had to get back and help out with. And I just ended up, you come to a city and then you stay there for a while, and I ended up putting down a few roots. I got a job teaching at university here, a small university. It was a college at that time, Capilano College, and now it's Capilano University. And I've taught there since, well, 1992. I took a break in the middle because I wanted to try just being a musician and see if I could support myself just playing, the kind of music I wanted to play. And it was okay, but at that time I was married, and my wife and I became pregnant with twins. And so along came the twin boys, and that they were born in 2002. And in about 2008, I went back and taught at the university again and re-upped with them. So I've been back there since then. Done lots of playing and recording, all different types of music. Sort of one of the cool sort of side, I guess you could call it, benefits of living in a smaller scene like in Vancouver, is that, we're free to try stuff, and we're not as, maybe people aren't as locked in their lanes when it comes to trying new projects, and you get a lot of support. So in other words, maybe in other cities, let's say my drumming, for instance, which I do quite a bit, wouldn't have got a lot of support from other musicians, especially drummers. Like,
Yeah.
what are you doing, man? You're not a drummer. Come on. But, super, because of that precedent having been set up here, and people being a multi-instrumentalist was a thing that you would see. I've been able to develop a lot of different aspects of my musicianship along the way, because I've been given those opportunities, playing drums, playing fusion music, which was the thing, I toured a lot through the 90s and into the early 2000s with a group called Metalwood, and a drummer named Ian Froman, who's based in New York, Mike Murley, tenor player who lives now way out east, but he was from Toronto for a long time, a bass player named Chris Terry. And it was, coming out of, you could say, of Metalwood and Headhunters, and, had a baby. It might come out. And I played trumpet and Rhodes piano in that band. So, yeah, another instance of sort of not being locked in a lane and feeling free to try different things. So my experience up here in Vancouver has been really excellent through the years. Not a huge scene, but really some really strong artists, and then no one more influential or strong than Corey Weeds, who
Right. Yeah.
who at one point was in my band that I taught up at Cap, playing saxophone. So he was a student of mine, per se, sort of at one point, but he's done his thing basically living here, and so we've all sort of been part of that, growing that from the beginnings, and now it's become like it's one of the premier labels and jazz situations that there is. So right here in Vancouver.
So yeah, let's talk a little bit about the Vancouver jazz scene, because I find it interesting. A lot of people don't know or don't consider Canada to be a big jazz scene, and I guess compared to New York or something like that, maybe it's not. But there's
Right.
always kind of been a presence of jazz up there. And looking back at when Corey Weeds was talking about that, the project that he did in the archival project that brought to light some of the jazz bands from the 60s or
Yeah,
late 50s.
60s and late 50s, but 60s particularly in Vancouver. Yeah.
Yeah, so talk a little bit about that, the kind of the idea of jazz coming from Canada, especially that area of Vancouver.
Uh-huh. Well, yeah, we are a bit remote, but then if you think of it more as a West Coast thing, like there is a real tradition back in the day. I mean, there's a club in Vancouver called Tyrant Studios that is on top of what is it? It's a strip club called the Penthouse, but it's an old one, and it's got a storied tradition. And there was a little suite in there where Louis Armstrong would stay. Sammy Davis Jr. would stay in there. Duke Ellington played the piano in there. It was a safe space for black musicians who couldn't stay anywhere else to stay there, and that place still exists. And so, um, right back to like the greatest of the greats have had a home in Vancouver at one point, and found it was a place that people could go and play and hang out. Ornette Coleman, early days, was getting a lot of his stuff together, lived in Vancouver for a while and played up here. So, these there's echoes of these. Jelly Roll Morton stayed at the Patricia Hotel, and there was a club down there at the basement. We used to play there, and we'd talk about him. He'd go up. He had a suite upstairs, and he'd come down, and So we've always felt through those kind of historical stories and situations that like connected. You know. Now, as far as me coming up in the scene and starting in the '80s, I always felt that there was a real strong connection for me to benefit from with the older musicians like Oliver Gannon, who had been playing, right through the late '60s and into the '70s. Great guitarist, and he'd tell me stories about like the Cave Supper Club back in the early days, and playing for all the great touring entertainers like Name and Name, and they were there, and so they'd play, back them up in a big band 6 nights a week. The CBC radio and television network, which is our public broadcasting, like our government broadcaster, hugely supportive, and so there was constant work for musicians. So they'd be doing sessions, 3 sessions a day, and then playing at night at the Cave or at Oil Can Harry's or one of these places. There was a kind of thriving scene, and I think a lot of it, the CBC played a big role in that. People playing sessions all the time for TV shows and radio spots and whatever, and making a really good living. So I'd hear these stories, growing up. I was on the tail end of some of that CBC work when I was first coming up in the late '80s and through the '90s. My band, my own original quartet, we'd get a chance to go in and record at the big studio in Vancouver, and then that show would be broadcast nationally, and there would be this particular jazz show, Jazz Beat, on the radio. And Canada is a big place, and there aren't that many of us up here, relatively speaking. To connect with the jazz scene across the country is really almost impossible. So that CBC connection and the Jazz Beat radio show, I got a taste of just a little bit of what it might have been like back in the day, doing some, sessions and playing at night. So, early days when I first started coming up here in Vancouver in the late '80s, never really felt like we'd have people come to town and play, of course. I remember seeing Winton play when I was 13, and that just turned my world around. Unbelievable. I hid in the bushes around the outside of this lobby in the hotel where they had this big venue where they were set up, and I couldn't get in because I was obviously underage, but I remember hiding in the cedar shrubbery and watching him play. But always feeling like these folks were coming from visiting, like these great musicians were coming from somewhere else, and Vancouver still, like in my mind, I felt like I had a lot of work to do. I wanted to be like that. I wanted to be playing on a level that was acknowledged, as being the level like the people who play in New York or big cities in the States. So Corey Weeds comes in, and as time went on, he started, connecting musicians in our scene in Vancouver with people coming from out of town, and backing up musicians and that whole tradition for a while. Little touch and go. Like I remember getting up there with my trio and backing up so and so and thinking, man, I don't know if I should be up here yet. But you live and you learn, and I've had so many great opportunities through Corey to play with the best of the best, and to try and measure up, and then go back to the drawing board. And so through the years, that's been those opportunities that Corey has provided largely have been real touchstones for me in terms of seeing where I'm at and trying to make sure that the whole what is that, the Dunning-Kruger effect, or when things start, you're in a remote place and you start believing your own hype, and it's not about that. It's about I wanted to. He asked me, who do you want to make a record with? And I said I would like to make a record with Peter Bernstein because Peter Bernstein is just the greatest. And then I hung up the phone with him. I'm like, oh my God, what have I done? But then I got to make a record with Peter Bernstein. Among other people on that album. So these are the opportunities that have come our way, and so our little scene in Vancouver has risen to the occasion, I think. And there are a good number of artists, jazz artists in Vancouver, who I would say are on a world-class level, and which is really saying something for a smaller scene. So I'm really proud of the work that people have done through the years here.
Yeah. So when did you first meet Corey?
Wow, I would have met Corey probably early 90s, like 93, probably when I came back to Vancouver. Or it might have been even a little before that, but I didn't really get to know him until those early days. And when he first started his club, we were there, and when he the first recording that he did, we did it, and nobody knew what they were doing, but we just did it and went ahead. And again, like with being in Vancouver, we never really felt like there was anyone hanging over our shoulder going, no, you shouldn't be doing this, nobody ever said that. And so we didn't. I remember not taking anything lightly. I wanted to do stuff that was worthy of the music, and I wanted to do things that contributed to the tradition of the music. And it's not like we were recreating the wheel up here in Vancouver. It's like we're trying to, get with it. So Corey and all the sort of the circle of musicians around him for a long time through those early years, really, we all jumped in and did lots of gigs, lots of recordings, lots of stuff, played at the club, hung out at the club, and it just grew. It grew. And with Corey at the lead, and, he's got so many skills as an entrepreneur. Like he has the skills in the areas that I have no skills. So he's really a wonderful friend to have in this line of work.
Yeah, unique individual for sure. Musician, wonderful musician, but also kind of a community kind of guy, and also starting the label, which now, to my estimation, he's got over 400 albums. I think and next year I think it'll be 25 years. I think next year will be 25 years. So
yeah, it's bananas.
Incredible.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to did you know you wanted to be a jazz musician right away, or when you said you went to college for classical music, did you want to go in that direction at first, or when did you kind of decide on the jazz trajectory?
Right. Well, as a young trumpet player, which was, trumpet and piano are very obviously very different instruments, and playing both of them, I can see the life of an instrumentalist from two completely different places, Like you could freeze me in a block of ice and thaw me out after 1,000 years and wheel me over to a piano and I could play you a C major chord on it, But give me a trumpet, nothing's going to happen for like 6 months, So that instrument, it really, as much fun as it was when I was young, and I kind of was getting along with it, And when that happens on that instrument for a young player, people give you a lot of attention because it's not as often that. So I really went to town with that thing, and my dad suggested, because I was really, really stoked to go down to North Texas like right away after high school. I wanted to play in the 1 o'clock lab band. I had the school calendar, and I'd open it up and look at the course that said 1 o'clock. I want to be in that, sort of envisioning this. But my father, who being a music instructor and also a musician, and knowing all the musicians in the area too, like he's connected with everybody, he did a bit of a survey. And the survey said that Brad should probably really learn how to play the trumpet properly before he embarked on any sort of, mystical, magical mystery tour of a jazz career on it. And that was sort of the thing, like it's better to learn how to, that instrument, particularly in the opinion of many people, was that it'd be better to learn how to physically play the thing. And then the piano that was in my life was going to be getting together my roadmap of music, and then at some point there'd be a confluence, of the two things coming together. That was the theory. So I went to Western Washington University in 1980, 6 to study classical trumpet. But the deal was I could do a double major there. So I did a bachelor's degree in classical trumpet, and that was my real full. I was really paying a lot of attention. And then the jazz degree there was a little less organized and not as. And halfway through my stay there, Chuck Israels came, and he was he took over the jazz program there. And for me, that was really great. And it was also, he was hard sometimes. He was hard on people. But I learned a lot from him. He played with Bill Evans in his trio. He recorded with Train. He played with Herbie, recorded with Herbie. Like with everybody. Tom Harrell, Clark Terry. So that was a real. I got some information and some perspective from Chuck that I don't think I would have been able to get from anyone else. Like he really. So that was my jazz experience. It wasn't so much trumpetistic. It was more conceptual and learning about Duke Ellington, particularly Chuck was so, of course, so you can't really go wrong if you're going to be like solid for like just fed one diet. Duke Ellington is a great way to go as a young kid. But then I finally got my chance to go down to North Texas and there were lots of cool experiences along the way and camps here. I did a summer camp a couple years in a row that Gunther Schuller ran, and Winton was there at that, and Victor Lewis was there, and Max Roach the first year was the musical director, and Joe Lovano. And so I'm sort of getting around, at that camp also was Seamus and, these sort of young up and coming players. And so I was kind of getting to know them and sort of feeling like, yeah, I'm becoming a jazz player, I think, like all of my sweat and effort was going into classical trumpet because it's almost impossible thing to do on a stupid instrument. So, but I was not, to be honest with you, really enjoying it as much as I think I could have. It was just so frightening and so much stress involved, and like don't make mistakes, and I always thought that the aesthetic, like working on that music as opposed to working on a monk tune, just different aesthetic, and also like sort of set off different feelings inside of me. So I kind of, I went the jazz route. I don't regret studying trumpet the way that I did because, it also has helped me be a better teacher. Not everything that I've come across as an instrumentalist has sort of been like found objects. If I'm learning through my own improvisational experiences, then that's not the most solid foundation to pass on to somebody else. It's pretty personal. Can be pretty idiosyncratic, So my experience at first was classical on the trumpet, but that was mainly as to get myself together physically. And then, technique and all that. And then the funny thing is when I moved back to Vancouver, I was like, young and naive, and I think it was 92, so I was 24, something like this. And I was just ready for the red carpet to roll right up to my door, the gigs are going to start flowing. And of course that's not the case, and that wasn't the case. And I ended up working a lot more as a piano player to start. And of course that makes sense, like if people are eating, solo trumpet is not the most appetizing, but solo piano, people can deal. So I did a lot of that. And then started playing in funk bands in Vancouver, and then it just sort of went like that. And that trumpet time that I put in on the instrument, I really, really came to really appreciate that I had done that, and be very, really grateful to my father for his input, because it has sustained me. Like it really, it's not like riding a bike playing that instrument, and it's been a lifelong relationship. It continues. So.
Yeah, it seems like one of the more difficult instruments for sure. I know several trumpet players, and it seems like you really have to keep yourself up on the instrument. Is that just the embouchure keeping your being able to?
It's just the nature of like these muscles here. They're not really made to be like in a sort of lockdown position, and it can, so in other words, you can work up the strength relatively quickly, and then it goes away. So, when it comes to playing, keeping the mouthpiece here, these muscles just basically lose their tensile strength a little bit, and endurance goes away. So, I'll sound amazing for like 3 minutes, which is not long enough. So I look at it like like the trumpet sort of has certain aspects to it that are kind of like just like doing push-ups. Musical, you have to do a certain amount of musical push-ups to play that thing, and then there's the fun, you know. But there are endless analogies that I can make to my students, you know. Like I played a lot of sports growing up, a lot of soccer, played lacrosse, which is, you know, our summer sport up here. And you know, the thing is, like, were we allowed to just go straight to the scrimmaging? You know, like, no, training was training, and there was no problem when it came to a game. We had no problem accepting that. That was what we had to do to get ourselves ready to play the game. So I've always looked at it that way, and you know, that's sort of the danger in my mind when I've sort of gone more to the jazz side and kind of left the classical stuff behind in terms of my practicing, and conceptually and improvisation wise it starts to get deeper and cool, but then physically I can't execute the ideas, and that goes away. So you know, it's just this balance. I find that the trumpet is a really it's an instrument that requires not just the short-term commitment, but if you're going to be a trumpet player, then it's definitely a lifelong commitment, and you have to sort of re-accept that every day.
What were some
One day
of
at a
the
time.
what were you talked about Duke Ellington, but what were some of the records or things you would listen to as far as your trumpet playing goes, trying to emulate the jazz, you know, trumpet and learning that phrasing, and then what were some of the ones that you listened to that you focused on playing piano?
Piano. Okay, well, so trumpet first and then piano, or
Yes,
like,
yeah.
okay, yeah, a few albums. When I was young, my dad, being a music administrator, he worked in the school board office, you know, and so the teachers that taught in the high schools, they would sort of kind of work for him, not for him, but he'd sort of oversee them. They would give him records to give me, and he didn't know what they were. Like, he's a classical saxophone guy, you know,
Oh,
playing in the
interesting.
marching band or whatever. So these records I had, and this is when I was like 11, 12, 13 years old. I remember the stack, and I still have them. I was actually anyway. The exact Feet of Kilimanjaro. That was Miles Davis. Nefertiti. I had Miles Smiles. I had ESP. So I had those records were like the very first jazz records that I really listened to. I also had a Miles Davis Greatest Hits. And of all the tunes that were on there, because, you know, I didn't quite understand that it was a compilation album. I didn't know. I mean, I had my records, but on there was My Funny Valentine. And see, I knew that song because I'd heard, I think it was on one of my mom's records. Maybe it was a Barbara Streisand album or something where she sang that song. I'm like, wow, what a nice song. And then I heard Miles Davis playing it. I'm like, that's not that song. But then it is that song. And my imagination just went wild. And I remember that recording of him playing that song on the trumpet, and it was so, I mean, to my young ears, it was so evocative. You know, I remember having these big white headphones on, those Caliphone headphones or whatever the hell my dad had from the board office. And it's Miles Davis's trumpet sounded to me like a voice, like just, there was so much in it. And no one had said anything to me about anything. You know, I was listening to Led Zeppelin. In my real life with my friends on the soccer team, you know, we're checking out like the Police had just happened, you know, and I was checking them out, and because the drumming was so great and blah blah blah. But this Miles Davis's trumpet sound, and then so quickly people started piling on albums as soon as Dad said, "Oh, he seems to like those." So pretty quickly, Bill Evans' Sunday at the Village Vanguard was in there. And I remember listening to that and thinking that, like, they must be performing in heaven or something. This music is like what angels do. You know, I had no idea about anything. But then the connection, Bill Evans, and I'm looking through on the greatest hits, and there's Bill Evans' name because there's stuff off of Kind of Blue, and then these connections start happening. I'm like, oh, these guys knew each other. You know, I try and describe this to my students about my early experiences with records and liner notes, and how it was just the perfect amount of information for me to solidly put two and two together and then live with four for like a month, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? So those records, as I got older, I really got, like, in high school, oh my God, when Miles came back and started playing again, I was in grade 8. And like when The Man with the Horn came out and We Want Miles, I bought them and then I put them on cassette. And I had a 63 Morris Minor Traveler with the wood paneling on the back, like a surfing car. And in it, I had these speakers that I'd saved up. And I went to Canadian Tire, which is kind of like, I don't know, Lowe's or what. It's like a, Fred Meyer, put it that way. And so I had these little speakers I got that cost all the money I had. It was like 80 watts of mid-range. It was like the world's loudest telephone in the back of my car. And I drove around town listening to We Want Miles over and over. So then now I'm listening to Mike Stern and
Yeah, awesome.
Marcus Miller and Al Foster. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's Al Foster from before. And so,
Yeah.
I'm starting to create my star map in my head. Clark Terry came in on the scene when I got into university, and Chuck was like, you need to listen to Clark Terry. And I think Chuck even said I shouldn't listen to so much Clifford Brown.
Yeah,
like,
that's
what?
funny.
And his reasoning was that, and he's a bass player, so you got to give him a mulligan. He was like, well, he plays too many triplets. I'm like, okay, whatever. That's not going to do it. I'm still listening to him. But Clark Terry came in, and there was a record called To Duke and Basie with Clark and Red Mitchell, just duo. And that is the most beautiful. I all of a sudden realized that, what I'd heard in Miles Davis's voice before, now I'm hearing a totally different yet equally and as deep, but more like a traditional, with the plunger and the nuance and so that just totally captured my imagination. Clark Terry, big huge thing, and then it just sort of developed. I was really always into writing too, so I really loved musicians who composed, and so of course Wayne Shorter became of everybody, just sort of rose in my mind and in my life. And I got to open for him twice, and I got to meet him, and I didn't even know what to say to him. I think I said something stupid like "thank you." I had to wait for half an hour because two of the volunteers from the festival were in there talking to him about Jaws, the Spielberg movie, right? And he's going off, and I'm thinking, I just want to say thank you to him, And it was like 40 minutes of them talking about movies. Anyway, I digress.
That's funny.
So Wayne Shorter, and then records like Etc. That particular record with that tune Indian song on it, and Penelope, and just his writing it really struck me that you could work in miniature like that. Like Wayne Shorter's tunes aren't 40 pages long. They're not science projects. They're so pithy, the word pithy, like they're just full of and he's boiled it down to its essential elements, and I just can't get enough of his music. So I'm trying to write with those kind of things in mind, like try and keep it minimalistic, but yet try and get as much meaning in there as I can. Make my tunes catchy to listen to. I always found Wayne Shorter's music so listenable, and like for anybody, you don't need to know anything about harmony, but as soon as you learn about harmony and you try and solo on one of his tunes, it's like, oh, here's the depth. Here's all of this below the surface that's for us to work on and get happening. But the tune expresses its personality very clearly, like right away. And so I've always tried to keep that in my sensibility in my writing. So those are sort of my, like touchstones. I mean, I could really go off. Unity, that's another record that I listened to just like when we were in college, like that, it had gone out of print, right? And so CDs were new. And so we were constantly going through at the used record store, like pawing through. And then they reissued that and a number of other ones on Blue Note. And I remember we had a party specifically with about, I don't know how many of us were there to listen to this freaking CD and, drink beer, but also check it out. Woody Shaw, such a huge influence, and, that's an interesting thing too. Woody Shaw's influence in that record. I remember being so excited because I had spoken with Victor Lewis at length about Woody Shaw when we were at the summer camp, and he was running things, and I just was like, oh, this is my chance to talk to the man about about Woody Shaw. So that record was huge in so many ways. My whole development as a jazz artist, you could draw lines to various records.
Yeah,
it's all about albums, and that's, I guess, growing up in a more remote place and sort of separate from things. That was my connection. I always figured like when I got a hold of Ready for Freddie, that Freddie Hubbard record.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like, oh man, there's no hiding anymore. Like it doesn't matter what my friend next door is doing. Like I'm listening to Ready for Freddie.
Yeah,
That's my
your
benchmark
standard
there.
now. Yeah.
Yeah. So and that helps when you're living off the grid, kind of, so to speak.
And then piano. So you mentioned Bill Evans. What
Yeah.
other piano players? Because Bill Evans is so unique and kind of has that bit of a classical feeling, but there's a that. Have you ever seen that on YouTube? There's a interview and it's got his brother on it,
Oh yeah.
and they're talking about, but Steve Allen gives the introduction, and he's basically like, Bill Evans is a genre unto himself, kind of thing.
Yeah.
What other piano players
Oh,
did you gravitate towards?
oh yeah. Well, this is a good. Early on, um, I'd listen to Bill Evans, but that was more like going to the museum and respectfully looking at the most beautiful thing you've ever seen and not understanding it at all. But I would continue to go to that museum and look at it. And someday it's going to mean, and it did. But early on, Chick Corea was really speaking to me, and still, So because there was so much accessible sort of Chick Corea portals, you could go to the Leprechaun and listen to that record, or you could go to, like, if you wanted to just get crazy, you listen to Romantic Warrior, or you could listen to Three Quartets, you know, and listen to record playing with and that, and I
Yeah.
listened to that record a lot because I did not understand what was going on that album. Um, but his playing to me sounded so compositional in such a neat way because you remember being in school and studying like Kodai and different like Eastern European composers, and then hearing this coming out of Chick Corea's playing, like then Now He Sings, Now He Sobs became like my
Classic.
like touchstone record forever. I still love that record so much. So this is all cool, but it was kind of playing to my strengths as a piano player when I was early on, and meaning like it was accentuating things I could already kind of sort of do in a linear fashion with my right hand. And the stuff that I didn't get about the Bill Evans artwork in the museum was all about the left hand and harmony and chording and voice leading and stuff like this. So I wasn't ready for that yet. So I stuck with, not that Chick Corea doesn't do that, but it's a different kind of thing when he does it. And then McCoy Tyner and record Tender Moments. I listened to that record a lot because it's arranging too, and this sort of cool little big band thing, and then he's in there, and it's just such a wicked, cool setting to hear McCoy Tyner. Love his playing. Ahmad Jamal. Listened to all sorts of Ahmad Jamal. And I started with, of course, everyone, usually piano students will listen to, someone says, you got to listen to Live at the Pershing, Poinciana, and then you do. I remember Ed Sof, who taught drums at North Texas for a long time, great drummer, said that that was the first fusion tune, in his opinion. And I said,
Interesting.
what? And I was like, interesting. So anyway, I
Yeah.
followed along, and there was stuff that, like later on, like The Awakening, like those records, Tranquility. Oh man, I love that that era of Ahmad Jamal. Just because it's a little more bombastic, and he's playing much more virtuosically, and there's modal kind of approach in there, and it's really like he's sort of going through the civil rights and how music changed. His music changed too, and so I'm a huge fan of his. Got to open for him at the Vancouver Jazz
Wow.
Festival, and I met him. Like our dressing rooms were right next to each other. He walked past, and I was so scared. I said, "There goes Ahmad Jamal. This is my chance." And I'm like, "Oh, you can't, dude. You can't." And then I went out, and his back was to me. He was about 20 feet, and I was like, "Mr. Jamal, what did I say? I don't know. You're the greatest. Thank you so much." And he didn't even turn around. He just went, "Thank you." Just kept going.
Keep going.
Wow. So Ahmad Jamal, and also the whole idea of, and you can hear this, like you might not hear too much sort of out and out kind of really on the nose Ahmad Jamalisms in my playing, but the way that the band works and the way that in my trio that there are parts being played a lot of times. Like I kind of, right now I'm going through a thing where I'm writing and we're almost like pop tunes. I'm trying to write tunes for my trio that are fun to listen to, and they're all different. Like when you get those, I don't know if you have them down there, the box of chocolates that someone will bring at Christmas. That's just the cheapo from, and
Yeah, yeah.
everyone's, and in there's the orange cream filled one.
Filled, yeah,
Don't have
mint,
that one.
yeah,
Just whatever. But so I want to make sure that none of them are the orange cream filled one on my record. You know what I mean? Like, oh, let's skip over that one. We don't want that one. So trying to make them all like that box of chocolates kind of thing, where they all have their own sort of little persona, and then gives our group sort of a new little challenge to deal with when we're playing it. So yeah, Ahmad Jamal's tunes being modular, being like cool bass parts, like just almost like a pop sensibility in a way in certain aspects, like having things be memorable,
yeah.
have a hook to it, but then like along the Wayne Shorter lines, like the harmony being dealt with is not just run of the mill straight up. And for those who are, into it, you can listen down into that rabbit hole if you'd like to. So I try and draw inspiration from my influences that way, and try not to be, too obvious about it, because I'm such a fanboy with like those players. Other
Yeah.
piano players that I really love to listen to too, like when I was growing up, my dad had "Hang On Sloopy," and also some early Peter Nero. Like they
Oh
sort
yeah,
of
yeah,
like piano players that like were sort of on the periphery of jazz, but doing something that was super strong.
yeah.
Um,
Kind of with a pop
so
twist to it or pop influence
yeah,
in some of
yeah,
the.
like something that is like there's a little bit more accessibility built into it somehow. Um, so I don't know. I mean, I've tried like with that piano. We've been playing as a trio in that piano group since 1997. So we've kind of tried everything, for better or for worse.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I find it interesting. I always talk to everybody I have on. I always talk to about the approach to, especially our generation, listening to the records, right? So,
yeah,
and you would focus more on really diving deep into particular records because you kind of had to. You didn't have playlists, you didn't have YouTube or all these clips of music you can listen to this person, and this person. You actually had a record and you had to sit down, listen to the whole side, and flip it over, listen to the other side. But you would
yeah.
really get into it, and I want to get your thoughts on that approach versus perhaps listening to a Coltrane tune, a Bill Evans, to going down the playlist and listening and saying, "Oh, let me take something from this, something from that," versus being able to really dive into a particular style, so to speak.
Right. Yeah. Well, you hit on this is so important. I mean, when I'm talking to my students, and I got a lot of students, and I've had a lot of students through the years, and if I had to pick one thing that would be central to my message to them, is exactly what you're talking about. It's this idea that when we're listening to music, you know, we, it's we're listening to learn at like if we're artists, you know, if we're students of this music, and we're listening to learn, and we're listening to grow, and then even at, at the highest level, if we're listening to learn in order to to contribute, to be able to do that at that kind of thing at that level, well then it really takes a lot of focus, and just it's just easy to understand. You just describe it that way to somebody and say, well, yeah, that would take a lot of focus. So does it make sense then to like to learn a little bit about like a whole bunch of things, you know, or to drill down on something, you know? I mean, I think most young folks will agree that I think it makes sense to focus, but yet it's been completely the corporate approach has been in the opposite direction. It's to piece it out. It's to part it out. It's to part music out. It's like you could sell this whole car, or you could sell it. Here's this rear view mirror, and here's this one, and make like 3 times the money. And so that's what's happened. And it's not even in the consciousness of a lot of young musicians to to, to consider the music a tune like a track as being part of an album. So I just really really try and get it across to them, like, look, what we're doing here goes beyond like what the average like enthusiast might be looking for. And for the average enthusiast, it might actually be beneficial to know, like, to have your knowledge as if it were like marbles that you cast off like on a frozen lake, and they're everywhere.
Yeah.
right? But for us, we need to ice fish. We need to stay in that one place and stay there, you know. And then you stay there for, and then they're like, "But how long?" I'm like, "I don't know. That's up to you,
Yeah.
right? And it'll figure itself out. But you don't leave it until you're ready to leave it, you know." And so, um, I really believe that for especially for people who really are trying to become, you know, and get into becoming a jazz artist. There's no way around. You absolutely, I think we absolutely have to get used to the idea that an album is a unit of music. That's you gotta, and like you said, the whole thing of getting up and putting it on, you had to make an effort. And
Right.
so I'm going to listen to the thing. I just got off my ass and put it on. I'm going to listen to it, and it was just what you did. You didn't get up again and like lift the needle off after,
Yeah.
you
No.
know, you
No.
just
Yeah.
let it play, you know. So yeah, it was out of necessity, and I'm so
Yeah.
grateful that that's how it was. But to get the young generation to to stick around with Clark Terry for a few months, you know,
Yeah.
like and also the fact that now music, there's no tactile media attached to it now. It makes it even more ethereal, that it's just part of the air, and so people, even if they're trying to not do so, they take it for granted.
Yeah, I think it's also part of the enjoyment too. Like when I got a record, I really liked it. I wanted to listen to it over and over again. I had
Oh
every
yeah,
little thing memorized. You know, even when I
yeah.
listened to my rock records, I would have the guitar solo memorized. I would
Oh my
play it
God,
and
yeah,
just wanted, you know. And so I don't
yeah.
know if that's kind of gone away. Maybe. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I think it might have gone away, and I think also like because with that, it's amazing. Like you're describing what you were doing, but you're also describing someone who had like an attention span. You know, that's you. You had an attention span for what you really were interested in. You know, I think that that's also something that's been like just by nature of the phone, the ubiquitous phone and tablets, and having everything parsed out to its smallest usable unit, and so you can get more of it happening. People just aren't really set up anymore for that kind of sort of long-term attention. But you know, I mean, I have opportunities like at school to like, you know, there'll be a class like once a semester, maybe we'll sit and listen to a whole album, you know. And at first I was kind of joking, but then I realized, oh, this is serious. Like this actually is a challenge. I'm just going to close the door because my cats are coming in. I don't want to.
sure.
All right. Sorry about that. Thanks. Yeah, so I think that that's a really key issue. I also know that when people really do fall in love with this music, that's no, they seem to have no problem like listening to Wilbur Ware all day, you know, or whoever it is you're focusing on, because now it's not about, you're not wearing jazz like a fancy hat or some sort of accessory, you know. It's something that you're trying to grow within yourself. Like it's, and we also learn that it's a human story. This music's not just music to be learned and played and kicked around and, like I said, worn like an accessory. This music is born out of the humans. The well, you know what I'm talking about. Like there's humanity behind this. Just read about Lester Young's life,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know. And so another thing, I'm really trying to get my students to read some biographies, some good ones, you know, about people. Read, and if even if it's you just get to the Wikipedia page, just drag yourself over there and read about Lester Young, please. You know,
Right.
because we're I think being led to believe now culturally that everything is up to us and it's about us and it starts and ends with us, and it's such an individualistic thing. You know, and there's benefits, I guess, to that in certain circles, but not in ours. Like
Yeah,
this, this
you're
is not.
carrying
I
on a
don't.
tradition. It's important to
Yes,
carry it on, and even if whatever changes are made, it still kind of organically
yeah,
develops, which
it
is
is, and it maintains its folk tradition in terms of how it's passed along, mentorship, you know, apprenticeship.
it's
Um,
important. Yeah,
Yeah, you know, so these are all these old school notions that also kind of are in that same category, that are like difficult to sort of get going with people because they require this sort of daily revisiting and this almost like meditative zen like commitment to something that's just kind of outside, like it's bigger than us, you know.
right.
Um, The last thing I need is to hear the young players, getting up and making a fool of themselves on stage and then getting off and patting themselves on the back for sounding so great. And it's just, we know that the boat has been untied from the dock and is way out to sea by that point. Like
Right.
there's nothing that can be done. So I don't know, I just try and use that Ready for Freddy analogy a lot too. Like, yeah, so and so's sounding great, and so sounding great, and so sounds really good these days. But Ready for Freddy
Yeah.
makes everything else moot.
Yeah.
Like, or pick a record. Unity or the ones I was. So it's still all there for us. It just, I think we've sort of been kind of coached to think that we don't really need to be committed to a tradition. We don't need to be practicing every day. We don't need to be transcribing other people's solos. We don't need to be recording ourselves playing. That's another thing I notice students don't do. And it's all in that same, like, that would be too much like really looking in the mirror.
Right. Yeah, which was that was a big thing. I mean, when we were able to
yeah.
record ourselves,
Totally.
that
man.
was like, oh, that's so great. And I go back and listen to it. I'm like, wow, that really sounds like crap. I sound anything like the
terrible.
record. But it made you better.
Yeah, it did. And it was like, oh my God, is that how I sound? Oh no. But there it was. And we would all sit and listen and we'd record I just recently transferred, since we're talking about this briefly, I went through and found all my old cassettes. They're in eras too. There's the cassette era. There's the mini disc era. There's the DAT tape era. And then for a while there, before DAT tape, in between, I was using my hi-fi VCR, if you can believe it, and bringing that to gigs, because you could record, just a little bit better than like the signal to noise. Anyway, these are the lengths that we would go to, right? And I try and describe our generation like it's not just me, it's you. It's like we all did this. It doesn't happen anymore.
And now it's so easy to do it. Now you can bring out a little portable 4-track, and you can record everything and have it sound pretty decent.
And it just doesn't seem to happen, So
yeah.
But anyway,
let's talk about your record. I want to talk about this because this is wonderful, and I want to talk about this, Brad, because I really enjoyed this. My only complaint on this is it's not on vinyl. So that's my only complaint. But
that would be take that one up with the boss. I don't like. Maybe we'll do a vinyl run, but I know Corey's, he just watches when you got a billion records out.
It's tough. It is tough. It's expensive to make them. But where did this project come from? Because here, these are pretty much all your own compositions, I think, with the exception of one tune.
Yeah.
And then how did you pick the lineup? How did this project come about? What was the idea behind it all?
Okay. Well, that trio with Darren and Bernie, the core group is the one that I've been playing with since a long time. And they were students back in the day when I first started playing with them, students of mine at the university. So I kind of grabbed them. And so we've been playing together for a long time. And like I say, we've tried all sorts of different approaches and different ideas. And we've had guests with the trio. And I wanted to do, Corey offered to do a record, because the last one I did pretty well. And it was just the three of us. It's called North Star, and it's out there too. I did that one myself, and that was just a digital release. So Corey offered, and I was like, yeah, I want to do something, and I wanted to augment the group, I wanted to, but adding a fourth voice to a trio instantly makes it not a trio, it's, if you put a tenor saxophone, well, then it's a quartet, but I wanted to sort of figure out a way I didn't want to use a vocalist, because that, then, as soon as there's somebody singing, that's all people want to listen to, for better or for worse, and another time for that. So I figured a percussionist would be awesome. And that reminded me of some records I really love, like Herbie Inventions and Dimensions, and, Red Garland stuff with conga, and, like just that idea, Ahmad Jamal, like with percussion. So I floated that idea to Corey, and he thought it would be really a good idea. And so I just set to work writing the tunes. The first tune that I wrote was that third one, Wonder Tramp, which is, and it's a pretty, like, it's an homage to, like, all sorts of stuff that has nothing to do with jazz piano trio. But, that was sort of the direction I decided I was going to go. I also have felt relatively unfettered, in terms of how I want to sound with this group. That's another thing about being here in Vancouver. Like, we don't necessarily have the the weight of the elders over us, like you better not put out a tune called Spring Peeper, like that's not serious. There's nobody like that, so I felt like, okay, as long as I'm gonna monitor myself and make sure I'm not just going completely into the clown zone with my music, and it's still serious. I can write fun music, so I wrote that tune, and then they just sort of followed along after that, and I had a few sort of thematic little ideas of things I wanted to address and see if I could come up with a few things. Yeah, so that project, it was a lot about the writing. I wrote, I think, almost 30 tunes.
Oh wow! Over what period of time?
Yeah, when Corey gets one of these things going, he'll often float the idea to me like a year in advance, like and maybe even a bit more, and then I often will just get going right away on the writing because I want to make sure that the tunes that make the record. Remember, I was talking about the candies. There'll always be that one with the orange filling that nobody likes. Like no orange filling. So if I write more tunes, and then I can go through them and then zero in on the ones that seem to hang together the best and have the most potential in my mind anyway, and then start working on them and rewriting and working. And so probably for about 4 or 5 months, there's writing going on. And then I try and get it done like a good check, maybe 6 months before the recording, and then just practice them, and that's not with the trio either. That's something I've learned about being a composer is that if I don't watch out, that I start treating that composer aspect of myself as if it's a separate, like I don't need to practice my own music kind of thing. Like, no, I do. I really do. In fact, if I don't, I'm the one that sounds the least prepared, So that happened for a long time. And then Jack Duncan, the percussionist, I didn't write any percussion parts, or anything like, what do you write? But I made some demos, on, these instruments over here.
Yeah.
So and kind of. Yeah, like just some basic stuff, and send him some, and then he re-demoed my demos and sent them all back to me with these amazing ideas, So I'm like, yeah, man, we're going with whatever you want to do. Different when I was younger. I was so afraid of like, oh my God, if I let him do it, then it won't be my vision in my head. It won't be exactly what I thought, which is control, which is fear, which is inexperience, right? But now it's like, oh man, if I can let somebody else do their job 100% on one of my projects, like then go, So the artwork, Corey's angle it was his idea of where I stand in the picture and all this kind of stuff. I remember there would be a time where I would really, no, man, I have an idea. No. My idea starts and ends with the music, and making sure that the piano playing is up to snuff. One thing, interesting enough, like about this record, the thing I'm most proud of, the playing and my friendship with the bandmates and all this is really important to me, but it's the liner notes that Rini Rosnes wrote. She's my hero. Rini Rosnes, we took piano lessons from the same teacher at the same little music school in Langley when we were kids, and she's like 4 years older than me. I've got a little newspaper cutout that my mom cut out. We won scholarships, little performance scholarships, and she's like at the top end of the spectrum, and I'm like at the bottom end. And I remember playing a piano recital at the beginning when I couldn't reach the pedals, my legs are really short, and she played at the end, and she wasn't that much bigger. But I remember she played, and the lid of the piano was going like this when she was playing. She couldn't have weighed more than 90 pounds. And I was like, oh my God. And so my whole life, since I was 10 years old, Rini Rosnes has been in, so I've gotten to know her and played on a number of records with her, Neil Swenson's albums, and a vocalist named Shannon Gunn, and, but this, when she actually agreed to write liner notes for my record, I thought, that, for me, is an achievement. A lifetime achievement for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you focused on the piano playing on this album. Was that intentional? It was like I'm not going to focus on trumpet. I'm going right for the piano.
Yeah. With this band, typically I just keep it a piano trio, and almost always with the fusion records back in the day, I would do trumpet and because like more is more in a fusion record. Like there's that, and there's that, and oh my God, but. Not so much when you're trying to do a jazz record. I mean, I would be really, really conscious of it becoming a circus act, like, and become distracting. And then also, I was also really sensitive about, I don't want to set myself up for that thing where somebody goes, yeah, but you should hear him play the trumpet, or yeah, but you should hear the, you know what I mean? Like, so if one is being presented, then people just have to deal with that, and you can like it or not, but you're not gonna, go, but yeah, you should hear the other thing. The record with Peter Bernstein, it was Corey's suggestion and encouragement that I played both with him. And I thought, wow, that's like pretty audacious, man, to sit down and play piano with Peter Bernstein playing guitar. But guitar and piano, is a delicate thing, and there's not a huge number of great examples and success, so I think it came off okay. I don't know that I could have done a whole record doing that. I think I would have lost my mind. I just like not wanting to, mess it up. But it helped that it was tunes that I'd written, and again, I practiced those songs so much that they were just in me, so that when I sat down with Peter, I could be as nervous as I wanted to be, and it would still happen. So for this one, yeah, I wanted to stick with piano, and probably it'll be a while before I do one again that has both instruments on it. I don't know. I still feel self-conscious about that. My dad brought me up to not show off. And it's somehow rooted in there that there's something a little bit too much attention grabbing. I mean, it's people know I do both.
Right.
Right. And I actually find, like, I kind of think in my own sort of way of thinking that it's a little bit more legit. It's a little heavier to do an actual piano trio. I mean, I could throw a couple trumpet tunes in there, and that'd be easy for me, and people would be like, wow. But the harder thing for me is to actually do the whole piano trio record. I've always thought of piano trio as kind of like being the string quartet of the jazz. String quartet is to classical music as piano trio is to
right.
Jazz. So that formal little setting, that's real chamber stuff can happen. So,
and then these guys you played with a lot, so
yeah.
I would imagine they picked it up quickly. Did you play before you went in the studio at all? Practice with them, or did you just go in the studio?
We did a couple. Actually, I think we did 2 rehearsals, which is a lot. And then we did a couple gigs, a number of actual performances, and played all the music, which was super helpful as well. Often that doesn't happen. Like sometimes it'll be like the ass backwards from that, where you just record it and then you go and play. And I'm like, why are we doing this? We should have. But it, scheduling wise, sometimes doesn't work out. But this time it was really good, and I felt super comfortable, and the audio too. Oh man, I was knocked out because my great friend, like the last record I did, Dave Sekula recorded it, and it came out really good. And we went to the same studio. He's a different engineer, but he's equally excellent, named Sheldon Zaharko, and he does all sorts of. You've seen his work, I'm sure, at the show. Like,
yeah, I'm trying to get him on. Actually, I'm hoping to have him on in the next couple of weeks to talk to him. So,
well, I had the partnership of to end all partnerships, because the guy that he studied and mentored under is named Sean Pierce, and Sean Pierce mixed the record, right? And Sean Pierce is the guy. Sean and Sheldon actually, but did a lot of our Metalwood fusion records back in the day. Sean went to Berklee School of Music as a trumpet player on scholarship with the bass player in Metalwood. So we're all sort of, Sean's been living in LA doing music for the USA Network. He's a big time guy now. But when Sheldon captures it, when he tracks it, and then Sean mixes it, it's got that beautiful, rich, juicy kind of sound. The drums, and Sean mixes the drums so good. He's like big time. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, that's one of the first things I listen for. Is the drums.
When I heard the drums on that record, I'm like, oh man, yeah. Like I can mix pretty good, but not. There's some magic that Sean knows how to do. So again, with like people who are good, they get to do their thing 100% on my record. I'm standing back.
So when you guys played these live, did anything change in the compositions where it's like, oh, we're going to do this a little different, or did anything develop?
Yeah,
and then when you went in the studio, it kind of made it what it was, or?
Yeah, like there's some overdubs on the percussion that happened in the studio that we couldn't, without bringing on like a whole army of percussionists, which would have been weird. Like we had to pare down. Some stuff live was more congas only with some other stuff, but like Jack did the whole like lowrider approach on on that Wonder Tramp tune, which I kind of I sanctioned. I was like, yes, that's exactly what I want. This to be one of those tunes where the sun's out and you're stepping down the sidewalk, like you're going to do something cool. And so he put on the timbales and all the stuff, but live we didn't do any of that. Also, there's some places in a number of the tunes where kind of like it's an homage Jamal thing where you reach a point in the tune where there's an opportunity for a vamp to happen, so like cueing that, and so we'll be playing live and we arrive at this point and we stay there and it just loops before cueing it to move on. So the tunes are built with that kind of in mind, that option is there, that the way that they're put together. So some of that happens when we're playing live for sure, but yeah, it was mainly like just the grand sort of nature of some of the percussion stuff was pared down to just congas. And Jack's an awesome conga player. He's really great. So it's really fun for me as a piano player playing with a percussionist because you're reminded that the piano is a percussion instrument. It's part of the percussion family. So if you've got a mind for that, and if you're a piano player like I am, who's like really gotten into a lot of more rhythmic kind of piano playing, like for instance, even like listening to a lot of Tower of Power, listening to Chester Thompson play, playing organ and playing some Rhodes, and listening to Herbie play clavinet, listening to, like Eddie Palmieri, or like of course all of that kind of playing. I don't profess to be an expert in Afro-Cuban piano playing, anything like that. But I figured that I write the tunes sort of in that direction and not like try and be like signal that I'm really trying to do something legit here. It's obvious that it's the flavor, and I'm trying to be respectful, and I'm letting Jack be as legit as he can be over there because I'm not schooled, in the music. But if the tunes are engaging enough, people are fine with it.
Right.
So,
and that's all part of it too. This is kind of with jazz, is that collaboration that you have these different musicians to come together, and you have a composition or a loose composition, but then you're able to speak back and forth. Everybody kind of has their own say, right, and their own contribution to what they're playing. And when you go in the studio, I guess you guys probably really didn't need any lead sheets hardly, really, since you guys have played these. But when you go in the studio, is it pretty much just play it a couple times, that's it, and then pick the best take? Is that kind of how you go about it?
Yeah, if things are working well, that's how you kind of want it. I think most people would agree that you want to, at this kind of music, you want to go in there prepared, and we want to try and give ourselves an opportunity to take the first or the second take, because that's where that indescribable, intangible kind of stuff often happens. Your first impression of something, and then your first statement. And if it's possible to take it, warts and all, then great. If not the first, then the second. So yeah, being prepared helps. And for me, like, this is not a requirement I make of anybody, but like these days since COVID, basically, just trying to memorize everything and practice it to the point where it's imbued upon my musical soul, when I sit down, it's coming from inside. I'm not reading it from an external source, which also for a long time with my own music, for some reason, I would tend to read it. And I think that was partially because I was surprised that I couldn't just play it from memory. I'm like, I guess I'm going to have to read this. But this is, really, like I said before, you got to practice one's own music. So I, make sure that I memorize it and really get it to the point where it's solid. So that then I can, like you say, be really interactive and also be helpful. Like if we're in the middle of performing or we're in the studio and something happens, if I'm like barely hanging on with my chart, like I'm no help. But if I'm like, I've got it, I'm on point, I can, you can save situations and keep going and not have things stop, I don't know, just, I feel like as a piano player particularly, it's really important for me to have my music really, and there's a billion piano players out there right now saying, well, of course, dude, you should memorize your music. But my music's not the easiest to memorize sometimes, and also the way my mind works and the way that I, learn things and my learning style. I'm of the generation that came before diagnoses and all that kind of stuff, but so I know I have a certain way of learning, I have a certain way of remembering, and I know that act a certain way under stress. And so recalling things, requires a certain approach to memorizing them. And I've really been working on that. So personally, yes, I got to make sure I've got my stuff totally together. And then as a band, if we can get a few gigs in, gigs are always the best. Rehearsing's cool, but nobody likes to rehearse.
Right.
So we did that, and then we go in the studio, and if we could do first take, great. Then second, and then if one of those tunes starts to become like, okay, we're going down the rabbit hole, we might do 4, 5, 6 takes, and then leave it and come back to it. There's nothing helpful about getting frustrated with a piece of music, and then the law of diminishing returns kicks in. And it's not that we don't have something better to say on it. It's just that we've gotten ourselves into a tizzy about it now, and it's just not going to get better.
Yes. So is this everything you recorded for that session? So you got 8 tunes here. Did you record more than this, or was this?
All of it.
This was all of it.
Yeah.
And then how many days were you in the studio on this? So you got
one.
Just one day.
I'm pretty sure it was it 1 or 2? It was more than 2 days. I'm pretty sure it was just 1, actually. So again, like Corey, when that happens, I always think, well, he's showing a lot of faith, and so I'm not going to let him down, and we're going to go in there and be prepared and kick ass. So it's nice to have those situations where you can look at it like a bit of a challenge too. Like, okay, this is old school. Like, I'm going in, I need to hold up my end of the bargain here, and then in so doing, I practice, I take care of my business. I'm a committed artist working on my stuff. I'm not just some sort of entitled person telling myself stories about who I think I am, like, no, I really want to do this. So yeah, one day might seem a little tight, or 2 days even, but not so much, if you're ready to go, 1 or 2 takes. And I think it's just the right amount of time.
Yeah. Is it more stressful in the studio on your own record or playing as a sideman on somebody else's record? I'm always curious.
Yeah. Well, I find it more stressful when it's one of my own records. But then that's where the extra preparation comes in as a mitigating kind of force. Like I'm still going to be nervous, but I know like an athlete, say, like one of the great athletes, like they probably are nervous, but they're only going to sink to the level of their training.
Yeah.
So, like, for my own record, as long as I'm prepared, I'll be nervous. For other people's albums, I'm not nervous at all, unless it's one of those situations, where kind of like it's a delicate thing, or like we're doing, where something hangs in the balance and it has to be just right. Often that'll be accompanying somebody, something delicate. Usually that's not the case.
Yeah.
Usually you've got your parts that you need to play. You want to do your best that you can and contribute, help everyone sound better, and and it's fun. I love being in the studio. I had a studio for quite a while. I've got a little one here going now, but so I'm really, ever since I was young, that was one of those other little things I always did was, like we were always messing around with recording stuff, our generation, because it was so fascinating, because it was so out of reach. And then all of a sudden it was within reach, and anything that was small, and you could, so I was totally into doing that at the beginning, and I've always loved the studio environment. There's a lot of stuff we did up here in Vancouver, for instance. I don't know if you ever saw a cartoon down there called Ed, Edd and Eddy.
I don't think so.
Yeah, it was on a Cartoon Network, and there was a movie even, like that up here. Those sessions up here, we did that for years, and I just remember loving that. Just think it was like they're almost like Carl Stalling, like those Looney Tunes sessions. It was an actual band playing to 2-track right to the cartoon, right? And it was one of these old school zany weird cartoons, and like just bananas, random stuff going on.
Yeah.
And just being in the studio for those sessions. So I love being in the studio. I find it a little more stressful when it's my thing. I produce for people too, and that's a different vibe, depending on who you're working with. But overall, though, I really I feel pretty good being in the studio.
Yeah, it's interesting. I like asking that question. Different people have different opinions on it. I remember Eric Alexander. He was talking about. He's like, well, when you play on someone else's record, you never know what take they're gonna pick.
Right. So you got to
So
always assume it's going to be the one. You got to make sure everything you do is you're going to sign off on it.
yeah, that's what he says. So he goes, you got to make sure everything you play is good because when you do your own record, you can pick whatever take
Yeah.
you want. Somebody else is going
That's
to
a good
pick.
point. I forgot about that. That's
Yeah.
true. Yeah.
Anyway, I thought that's interesting. Everybody's got their different outlooks on that. Um, what are your future projects? What are you looking at? What do you have coming up, and what are you doing live here coming up?
Yeah, well, there's another jazz festival coming up here, so we're playing a couple things. I'm playing piano with a young tenor player in town. Who's a really great up and coming player named John Nicholson. So I'm playing in his band, and I'm like the oldest guy in the band, but whatever. Like they're old students, but that's really fun. I'm finding myself in that setting, particularly playing piano a lot for people. So there's a number of those kind of things coming up this summer. I'm going out to Toronto in August at the beginning to play and record with a guitarist out there named Rob Pilch and bassist, famous Canadian. Well, he's a famous Canadian guitarist, and also Neil Swenson on the bass, who has got quite an international reputation and toured with
Yeah.
George Shearing for years and years, and played with Oscar. Great. So I'll be playing 5 nights with them, and then we're going to go in the studio for one day, again with one of those one days. On the trumpet, though, actually, really, like one day, if it's not going to happen, then more days doesn't really help. Piano, more days can help. Trumpet, if it's not there, it's not there. So that's a thing. And as far as my own projects go, I've been writing music because I've always played the drums. And I didn't mention this, but because I studied in high school, but the very first thing that there are pictures of me doing is playing ice cream buckets with chopsticks in the hallway. And my mom had put on a Chicago record because she liked Chicago back in. This is in '69. I was 2 years old, and there's photos. And so I've always played the drums. And my uncle Vince, who's a drummer, he passed away recently, and that was a big deal in my life. But it's sort of I've always been playing drums, and I've played on albums for people as a sideman as a drummer. But I've never led an album as a drummer. So I've been writing music, and I'm trying to figure out what kind of music am I writing here? What is this? So I'm stuck in between, am I, because I can't get the John Scofield records out of my head with Bill Stewart, all those albums, with Joe Lovano and that stuff. But I'm like, no, that's, what about two guitars? I'm thinking maybe two guitars, the Pat Metheny and Bill Frisell thing, or Scofield and was it Scofield and Frisell? I can't remember. And bass and drums. So that's sort of, right now it's been in the rock polisher of my head, just going over and over until I sort of zero in on what it is I want to do. Then I can start writing the music, and I'll make some demos, and we'll see. Usually with Corey, one of my methods when I have a new project is I'll go ahead and just do it as good as I can do it, and then present it to him.
Right.
Say,
Yeah.
hey man, yeah, you want to put this out? What do you think? And that's what happened with the other trio record. And then sometimes he'll approach me, and when he approaches me, I can expect that I won't be paying for this or that or the other thing. But in this case, when I want to just go ahead and start a project, I just go ahead and do it. So that's what I'm thinking of. I've been practicing drums a lot, because why not? Here I am in Vancouver. My piano playing and my trumpet playing, I've done them now to a point. There is a point where after you've put in your 10,000 hours, and no matter what I say about the trumpet not being like riding a bike, and it's not, but give me a couple weeks and I can always get it back to that point. So those instruments now are at a place in my consciousness where they're just part of how drums is getting there. And so I'm like, wow, that would be a nice little personal project to, try and get that to a point where I could play my drum record for, my friend Dan Weiss, and he wouldn't go, dude, you shouldn't have done that. So, he would say, good, so I sort of think of those are my touchstones. If Dan would listen to it and say, okay, you're not pissing me off by doing that, then okay.
Yeah. What are some of your favorite drummers? I know whether it's jazz or whatever genre, there's some ones that you try to really focus on.
Yeah, well, there's the drummers that I love and admire that I could never play. Like Dan Weiss is at the top of that list. That guy's amazing musician and such a cool guy, you know. Anyway, so he's over there in the someday maybe kind of category. But you know, of course, I love listening to, like I mentioned, Al Foster.
Mm-hmm.
I love listening to Al Foster. Vernel Fournier, with all the Ahmad Jamal records, one of my favorite things was just how he would play, you know. Jack DeJohnette, on the rock side, Stuart Copeland, 100% Stuart Copeland. Stuart Copeland.
Yeah, great. He's a great drummer.
Neil Peart. Phil Collins, early days, playing like all the early Genesis records. I would listen to those like crazy. Fly on a Windshield. Like listening to him play on Grandma's Down on Broadway. It's like, wow.
Yeah, great album.
Bill Bruford. I love listening to that kind of playing.
Yeah.
Harvey Mason. You know, listening to modern drummers like. Listening to I listened to Steve Coleman and Gene Lake on the Steve Coleman and Metrics. That was huge. Like, again, put that in the maybe someday category.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard that. Yeah.
There's one called The Way of the Cipher that's recorded live with 3 rappers. It's like from 1991, and the drumming on that is just like bananas. Obviously, Roy Haynes. You know, any list, all the, you know. I'm such a huge fan of drumming that Tony Williams. I'm remiss. I'm leaving Paul Modian. You know, Zigaboo Modalist. Oh my God. Just was listening to Way Out West. So Shelly Manne.
Oh yeah, what a great record. Yeah. Incredible.
You know, like so great. So yeah, the drumming list goes. Man, I see my battery's just about to run out.
Yeah, I think we're going like an hour and a half here, so yeah, we'll wrap it up here. I appreciate you hanging out and talking.
All right, it's awesome to talk to you.
Wonderful talking to you, and again, fantastic record for everybody out there. Go out and pick this up because this is wonderful, and just fantastic record. It sounds wonderful, great listen. So yeah, I'm glad that people like you are putting out great music like this. So
cool, man. All right,
well, hopefully we can talk again, and we'll let me stop here.
All the best.